My name is Emily Parker, and if there's one thing I've learned in the last few years, it's that blood doesn't always mean family. I grew up in what outsiders would call a typical American household, a modest house on Maple Street, a white fence, a dad who worked hard his whole life, and a mom who liked to pretend everything was perfect when the neighbors came around. I was the youngest of three. My sister Linda, the oldest, was always the princess. She had the good grades, the big wedding, the constant approval of my mother. Then there was my brother Mark, charming, funny, the type everyone liked at first, until you got close enough to see how selfish he could be. And then there was me. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the star. I was the one who worked 2 jobs in college, sent money home when Dad's health started failing, and took care of the little things my siblings were too busy for. I used to tell myself that was my role, the glue that held us together, the dependable one, the one who never asked for much in return. When my grandparents passed away, I thought maybe things would change. They had worked their whole lives building up savings and property, and even though they weren't rich, they left behind more than anyone expected, about $250,000. I remember the first time I heard the number. My heart raced, not because I was greedy, but because for once, I thought maybe life was finally giving me a break. I'd been scraping by for years while Linda and Mark always seemed to land on their feet. This inheritance could help me and my husband, David, finally buy a home of our own, maybe even start a family. But I should have known better. Because what I didn't realize that day, as I sat in that lawyer's office surrounded by the people I trusted most, was that the inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a test. My family was about to fail in the worst way imaginable. And that's when the nightmare truly began. The day of the will reading is burned into my memory like a scar. We were all crammed into a polished wooden office that smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. The lawyer, a gray-haired man with glasses sliding down his nose, shuffled papers while my mother sat tall and stiff, like she was already in control of the room. I sat beside David, squeezing his hand under the table. My brother Mark lounged back in his chair like this was some casual meeting, while Linda kept checking her reflection in her phone's black screen, flipping her hair as if she were auditioning for something. When the lawyer cleared his throat and began reading, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear. The numbers rolled off his tongue. $250,000 split among the family. My breath caught. That meant each of us could walk away with more than I'd ever had in savings. But then the words changed, the details shifted, and my smile began to fade. According to the will, Mark was to receive $100,000. Linda would get $100,000 as well. My mother, Margaret, was listed to receive $40,000. And me? The lawyer paused when he reached my name, almost like he knew the weight of what he was about to say. Emily Parker, he read, will receive $10,000. $10,000 out of $250,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. My ears rang. I looked around the table, expecting confusion, expecting someone to say this had to be a mistake, but no one flinched. Linda smirked faintly, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Mark tilted his head back with a grin that spread across his face, and my mother wouldn't even meet my eyes. I leaned toward David. "That can't be right," I whispered. But the lawyer just continued, flipping to the next page like my entire world hadn't just been ripped apart. I sat there in silence, my hand shaking, as I signed the acknowledgement paperwork. $10,000. That was all I was worth to them. Or so they thought. Because what I didn't know then was that the papers I signed that day hid secrets my family never wanted me to find. Secrets that would change everything. For weeks after that meeting, I tried to convince myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe my grandparents had a reason for leaving things uneven. Maybe they thought I didn't need the money as much. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The first red flag came at a family dinner a few weeks later. We were at my mom's house, the same dining table where I'd spent my childhood, and the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Mark was bragging about a business opportunity he was investing in, dropping hints about buying a new truck. Linda chimed in about remodeling her kitchen as if the inheritance had already padded their bank accounts. Meanwhile, I was pushing peas around my plate, trying not to choke on the bitterness rising in my throat. Finally, I asked it. So, did Grandma or Grandpa ever explain why things were divided the way they were? The table went silent. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. Linda smirked without looking up, and Mark actually chuckled. They just wanted what was fair, my mother said flatly, not meeting my eyes. You got your share. Don't start stirring up drama. Fair? I repeated, my voice shaking. $10,000 out of $250? You really think that's fair? Linda leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. You always act like the world owes you something, Emily. Maybe Grandma and Grandpa finally saw through it. Her words cut me like a knife. I had been the one sending money home when Dad was sick. I had been the one helping Mom with bills when she called me crying. I had been the one who sacrificed while they lived comfortably, and now they were painting me as the greedy one? David reached under the table and squeezed my hand, trying to ground me, but I couldn't shake it. Something wasn't adding up. And then, a few days later, I found the first piece of proof, a piece of paper that shouldn't have existed, a piece of paper that would unravel everything. But at that moment, I didn't realize how deep their betrayal went. It happened on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I had gone over to my mom's house to drop off some groceries for Dad. He'd been getting weaker, and David and I were helping however we could. Mom wasn't home, but she had left me a key years ago, so I let myself in. After putting the groceries away, I decided to straighten up a bit. Old habits die hard. I'd always been the one cleaning up when no one else would. That's when I noticed a stack of folders on the kitchen counter. At first, I thought they were just bills, but then I saw the label on one, estate documents. My chest tightened. I shouldn't have opened it, but something in me, something deeper than curiosity, told me to look. My hands trembled as I flipped through the papers. Most were the same ones I'd seen at the lawyer's office. But then I came across something strange. A transfer form with my name on it. Only it wasn't my signature. My heart skipped a beat. I knew my handwriting, my loops, the way I dotted my I's. This wasn't mine. It was shaky, almost forced. Someone had forged my name. The document stated that I had agreed to a reduced share in exchange for early financial assistance already provided. I read it twice, 3 times, my stomach twisting tighter with each word. I had never signed anything like that. David, I whispered later that night, handing him the paper, this isn't me. I never signed this. He studied it carefully, his brow furrowed. Emily, this is serious. If they forged your signature, they cheated me. I cut in, my voice breaking. They actually cheated me out of my inheritance. David placed a hand on my shoulder, steady and calm. We'll figure this out, but you can't let them know you found this. Not yet. I nodded, but inside anger was boiling so hot it scared me. The people I had trusted most, my own flesh and blood, had not only betrayed me, they had written me out of what was rightfully mine. And worst of all, this was just the beginning, because a few nights later, I would overhear something that made my blood run cold and confirmed the truth in the most brutal way possible. I couldn't keep it in. The anger, the betrayal, the shame, it ate at me like poison. I told myself to wait, to be careful, to follow David's advice and keep quiet until I had more proof. But one evening, at yet another family dinner, I snapped. We were sitting at that same dining table, the one that had seen birthday cakes, Thanksgiving turkeys, and endless arguments over the years. Mark was bragging about some investment deal, Linda was scrolling on her phone, and Mom was pretending not to notice Dad coughing into his napkin. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled the folded paper out of my purse and laid it on the table. "Do you care to explain this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The room froze. Mark's smirk faltered. Linda glanced up, annoyed. Mom's fork hovered in midair. "That looks like paperwork," Mark said casually, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. "It's a forgery," I shot back. "It says I gave up my share of the inheritance in exchange for money I supposedly already received. But I never signed this. Someone forged my name." Mom finally set down her fork. "Emily," she said in a low, warning tone, "don't start making accusations you can't back up." "I don't need to make accusations," I snapped. "This is proof." Linda let out a laugh, cold and sharp. "Oh, please, you probably forgot you signed it. You've always been scatterbrained." My hands shook under the table, but I kept my chin high. "I didn't forget. I would never sign away that kind of money. You all know that." Mark leaned forward, his smile thin and cruel. "Maybe Grandma and Grandpa just didn't trust you with it. Ever think of that? Maybe they thought you'd waste it." "This is not what this is," I fired back. "This is fraud. This is theft." For a moment, the air in the room was heavy enough to crush me. I wanted one of them, just one, to admit it, to apologize, to show even a flicker of guilt. But instead, they all laughed. My mother shook her head like I was a foolish child. Linda muttered something about me being dramatic as usual. And Mark actually clapped his hands together and said, "Good luck proving anything, sis." My cheeks burned with humiliation. My own family was mocking me for catching them in a crime. But if they thought I was going to walk away quietly, they didn't know me at all. Because I had no idea that just a few nights later, I would overhear them bragging and it would confirm everything I already knew. It happened by accident. A few nights after that disastrous dinner, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced. I had convinced myself I was going to grab a few old photo albums for Dad, something to lift his spirits. It was late, maybe 9:30, and the living room light spilled out through the curtains. I was about to knock when I heard voices, my mother's, Linda's, and Mark's. I froze. "She actually thinks she can fight us." Linda's voice floated through the thin walls, laced with amusement. "She waved that paper around like it meant something." "She's pathetic," Mom said, her tone colder than I'd ever heard. "Always acting like the martyr. 10,000 was generous, if you ask me." My chest tightened, but it was Mark's voice that made my blood run cold. "Generous, please. If it weren't for me, she wouldn't have gotten a dime. You know how deep I was in debt. I needed that money. Cutting her out was the only way to cover it." I nearly buckled. Debt? Was that the reason behind all this? Linda laughed, sharp and cruel. "And she's too stupid to realize we forged that signature. Honestly, Mark, your handwriting is terrible. I'm surprised the lawyer didn't catch it." I slapped my hand over my mouth to stifle the gasp threatening to escape. My brother, my sister, my own mother? They weren't just hiding something, they were openly bragging about it, mocking me. "Relax," Mom said with finality. "She'll get over it. She always does." I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. Every word I just heard was like another knife in my back. They didn't care that they stole from me. They didn't care that they betrayed me. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd roll over like I always had. But standing there in the shadows, trembling with rage, I made myself a promise. They would regret underestimating me. Because I wasn't going to let this go, not this time. And that was the night the idea of revenge started to root in my mind. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices again. My own mother calling me pathetic, my sister mocking me, my brother admitting he forged my name. The betrayal replayed like a broken record, each word digging deeper. But with the pain came something else. Clarity. For the first time in my life, I stopped wishing my family would love me the way I loved them. I stopped hoping they'd change. Instead, I started planning. The next morning, I told David everything. I expected him to be furious, but instead he was calm, too calm. He just nodded and said, "Then it's time to fight smart." Together, we started gathering everything we could. I went back to Mom's house when she wasn't home and quietly photographed every suspicious document I could find. David contacted a lawyer he knew through work, someone discreet, someone we could trust. When I showed the lawyer the forged document, his expression darkened. "Emily, this isn't just unethical," he said. "This is criminal. If we build a solid case, not only can you reclaim what's yours, you might walk away with even more." The thought sent a chill down my spine. More than the $250,000 they tried to steal, more than they ever imagined. So I kept playing the role of the quiet, overlooked little sister. At family gatherings, I smiled. I nodded. I pretended to believe their lies. Meanwhile, every smug word, every careless brag they made, I stored away like ammunition. Mark mentioned his debts again, this time drunkenly bragging at a barbecue. Linda slipped up saying, "Well, it's not like Emily can prove anything." And Mom, she kept dropping subtle reminders that family should stay loyal no matter what. They had no idea I was recording them. Every laugh, every insult, every careless confession, I captured it all. And as the evidence piled up, so did my resolve. I wasn't just going to take back what they owed me, I was going to make them choke on the very lies they fed me. Because soon, I would be the one pulling the strings, and they wouldn't see it coming. Revenge is a strange thing. It doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, wrapping around you like smoke, until every move you make is fueled by it. By the time summer rolled around, I was ready to take my first step. It started small. At another family dinner, I casually mentioned, "Funny thing, I was talking to a lawyer friend the other day about forged documents. Apparently, the penalties are pretty steep." The fork slipped right out of Linda's hand. Mark's smile faltered. Mom gave me a sharp look, the kind that silenced me when I was a kid. But I didn't look away this time. I just kept eating, like I hadn't said anything unusual. That was the first strike, planting the seed of paranoia. A week later, I followed it up with another. I accidentally left my phone recording on the counter during a visit, then returned 10 minutes later, pretending to have forgotten it. I caught the way they whispered the moment I walked out. I caught the way Linda hissed, "What if she knows?" I didn't need the recording for evidence. I already had plenty. But they didn't know that. What I wanted was for them to start unraveling, to turn on each other. And it worked. At the next gathering, Mark snapped at Linda over something small, his voice rising, his nerves fraying. Mom tried to calm them down, but her mask was slipping too. For the first time in my life, I saw cracks in their perfect little alliance. That night, David grinned at me across our kitchen table. "You've got them scared. Keep pushing," he said. So I did. I dropped hints about having backups of everything. I mentioned a safety deposit box. I smiled too sweetly when Mark tried to intimidate me, and I watched the flicker of doubt in his eyes. They thought I was weak. They thought I was stupid. But now they didn't know what I knew or how much evidence I had. And the truth was, I hadn't even played my strongest card yet, because soon all of this would move from whispers and suspicions to a courtroom, and that was where the real reckoning would begin. The day of the hearing felt unreal, like I was walking into the final act of a play I never auditioned for. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer beside me, David's steady presence just behind. Across the aisle, my family, my own blood, looked more like strangers than kin. Linda's lips were pursed so tightly they were white. Mark looked pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Mom sat rigid, her face set in stone. The judge entered, and my heart thudded in my chest. This was it. My lawyer began with the basics, the inheritance, the original will, the suspicious changes. Then he laid out the evidence piece by piece, my signature compared to real ones, the discrepancies in the paperwork, the timeline that made no sense. When the forged document was placed on the overhead screen, I felt every eye in the room shift to me. "That is not my signature," I said clearly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I never signed away my share. My family forged this document." A ripple of whispers filled the room. Then came the recordings. My lawyer played the audio of Mark bragging about his debts and admitting that they had cut me out. Linda's mocking voice filled the courtroom, followed by my mother's cold declaration, 10,000 was generous. Mark's face drained of color. Linda's jaw clenched. Mom wouldn't look at me. The judge leaned forward, brows furrowed. So not only was this inheritance manipulated, but there was deliberate intent to deceive and defraud. "Yes, Your Honor, and we have ample proof." I glanced over at my family. For once, they weren't smirking. They weren't mocking me. They looked cornered, trapped, exactly as I had felt sitting in that lawyer's office months ago. But now the tables had turned. The defense tried to argue, of course. They claimed I was bitter, exaggerating, twisting things. But evidence doesn't lie, and I had more than enough. When the judge finally spoke, the words hit the room like thunder. "This court rules in favor of Emily Parker. Full restitution of her rightful inheritance is to be granted with additional damages for fraud and emotional distress." I gripped David's hand so tightly, I thought I'd crush it. My family's mouths hung open in shock. The number the judge announced wasn't just my original share, it was more than double. $200,000. I had taken back what was mine, and then some. And as I walked out of that courtroom, their glares burning into my back, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because revenge doesn't stop when the gavel drops. It lingers, it festers, and it changes everything. The days after the courtroom victory were surreal. Everywhere I went, I felt lighter, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. But at the same time, the tension was everywhere. My family's world had been turned upside down. Mark stopped calling me, and when I saw him at the grocery store, he avoided my gaze. Linda posted passive-aggressive status updates on social media, thinly veiled jabs about trusting the wrong people. Mom didn't speak to me at all, and the silence was almost worse than the words. For the first time, I realized the extent of their dependency on appearances. They had relied on me being the quiet, obedient one, the scapegoat they could manipulate without consequence. Now, that role was gone. I didn't gloat, not really. I didn't need to. Every look of frustration, every whisper behind my back, every social media post dripping with fake sympathy, it was enough. The humiliation had done its work. They had underestimated me for years, and now they were paying the price in full. David and I finally moved into our own home, a modest place, but ours. I used part of the restitution to pay off debts we had, and part to secure our future. For the first time, I didn't have to worry about being overlooked, ignored, or cheated. And even though I had won financially, the real victory was something more subtle. It was knowing that I had stood my ground, that I had trusted myself when no one else did, that I had proven, even to my own family, that loyalty and kindness don't mean weakness. I know some people might say revenge only corrupts the avenger. Maybe that's true in some cases, but in my case, it freed me. I didn't need my family to apologize. I didn't need them to admit their lies. I didn't even need them to acknowledge me. I only needed to reclaim my life, and that I had done. As for them, they would never look at me the same way again. And that, I realized with a quiet, wicked satisfaction, was worth more than all the money in the world. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just taking back what's yours, it's showing them that underestimating you was the biggest mistake of their lives. And trust me, they would never forget it. It's been months since the court case ended, and life has finally settled into something resembling peace. David and I are building a home, a life, a future that isn't tied to lies or manipulation. But sometimes, late at night, I catch myself thinking about them. My mother, my brother, my sister, and the betrayal that shaped me. I don't feel anger like I used to. It's more clarity now. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. And most importantly, I know that loyalty should never come at the expense of self-respect. People always say that family is everything, but family can also be the source of your deepest wounds. Mine certainly was. I gave them my trust, my love, my heart, and they tried to steal my future. But I refused to let them win. Winning wasn't just about money. It was proving that I wouldn't be silenced, that I wouldn't be pushed aside, that I was stronger than anyone had ever given me credit for. And sometimes, when I think about the look on their faces the day the judge ruled in my favor, I feel a dark sort of satisfaction. Not the cruel, angry kind, but the kind that comes from finally taking back control. I learned a lot from this. I learned about betrayal, deceit, and greed, but I also learned about resilience, courage, and the quiet power of patience. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be messy or vengeful in a blind way. It can be calculated, smart, and deeply satisfying. And now, as I sit in my own home, in my own life, I know one thing for certain. I will never let anyone underestimate me again. Blood may be thicker than water, but it doesn't have to define your fate. And if someone tries to cheat you out of your life, your future, your dignity, remember this. Sometimes the best revenge is simply taking back more than they ever dreamed of. Because I did,